That's what. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Jazakallah khair for joining us again for this series on the history of the Blessed Lands, the history of Al-Quds. Now, I do see that there's alhamdulillah, a couple of new faces here. So I just want to reiterate a little bit, right, before we kind of jump into today's topic, that we're not covering the history of the Blessed Lands of Al-Quds just for fun, right? And we're not doing it for the sake of history either. But it is so we can sort of understand what is going on around us, specifically in Al-Quds, in the land of, in the city of Jerusalem, in the land of Palestine. And in a lot of ways, as we kind of progress through the series, in the Muslim kind of ummah as a whole. Now, we went through a lot of history, right? And we actually started this whole series from right at the moment where Musa alayhi salam is rescued from Pharaoh, right? And we took it all the way to the Islamic period. And from there, we kind of jumped into, I would call kind of the modern period, right? Post 1924, with the destruction of the Uthmani Khilafah, the last sort of state of the Muslims. And we have kind of got into most of the history that we are aware of, right? So again, the purpose of this series is to sort of make sense of it. Why has this been going on for so long? Why is Palestine and the area of Al-Quds always in chaos? How come we haven't been able to attain peace? How come the peace process has been going on for so long? In the earlier session we had, right, we started from 1948 when Israel was officially declared a state, or they declared themselves a sort of state or entity. And we stopped all the way to about 1973. And just to kind of give a little bit of the main ideas, right, we were going through last time, right, is that we discussed, because to really understand this, right, we have to discuss, right, what are the types of states out there? We have to understand a little bit about how does the world work today? How does politics work even now and similarly in the time of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? And so we posited, right? We talked about last time that there is essentially three types of actors in the stage of the world, right? There's leading states, and there's orbiting states, and then there's what I would call like subjugated states, agent states, basically have out of curiosity, anyone remember how we sort of define those? It's okay, it was 2 weeks ago, but well, essentially, right, just to kind of give it in a nutshell, right, leading states are states who have a vision, right? They have a vision for the world, and they want to make the world conform to that vision. They have something that is greater that they're fighting for, whether that be power or order or control or etc. And then there's orbiting states, right? These are people that have some sort of independence. They're not like the leading states. They don't create events, but they have some sort of independence, and they are kind of seeing, okay, how can I fit into the picture? How can I gain a little piece of the pie? How can I kind of conform to kind of what's going on? How can I go with the flow? And then there's subjugated states, which have almost no free will. These are people that, unfortunately, everything they're doing doesn't really benefit their people, doesn't really do anything. All it does is conform to the order that's sort of been set up. We talked about that we are actually, speaking of order, right? We're in a very strange state of affairs, right? And context is important. And just to reiterate that, the context of today is a strange one for the Ummah, right? Since 1924, the Muslims have lacked a authoritative body that has kind of controlled their affairs. And since then, there have been other players that sort of popped up. Anyways, we're not going to get too much into that today. Inshallah, if anyone is interested, please watch the previous series, and of course you can open it up in the question and answer. So anyways, to proceed. So in particular, last time we went over the official declaration of the entity of Israel in 1948, right? And then we went all the way up to 1973, and we dove in particular to the wars that happened between that time span, right? There was the initial war with Israel in 1948. There was the 6 Days War sometime later. And then finally the war of Yom Kippur, which happened in 1973. And we found that looking at these various situations, it became very clear what the real objectives were behind what's going on. We found that in the last war, right, in 1973, the Egyptian and the Muslim armies, they actually decimated Israel, in terms of military might. In 2 days of fighting, Israel had lost 49 aircrafts and 500 tanks. And so we learned that, okay, hold up a second. A lot of things we heard growing up was not necessarily true. Despite the mythos of invincibility, Israel lost. It was dependent. It was a fragile nation whose existence is complicit both on the superpowers of the time and its neighbors. We found that in this position of power, instead of moving forward to Jerusalem, to Al-Quds, to the Holy Land, the armies of the Muslims were like, they pretty much retreated, and they opted for peace. They said, we want peace. They said, we want to participate in the peace process. Now, essentially, this is kind of what we're going to be getting into today. Is that since this time, there's been lots and lots of effort for peace, right? And as things get a little bit complicated, I thought, let's take a step back and try to understand, so what exactly does peace mean? Right? Because I don't know about you guys, but I've been hearing this like for the majority of, growing up and stuff. Peace. We want peace. We want peace in the Middle East. We want peace in the Muslim world. We want peace. What? But let's just even take it into a more simple and basic kind of understanding. What is peace? And there's no wrong answer. So whatever you guys want to kind of posit, inshallah, we can work with that. So what is peace? Stability. Stability. Okay. Anything else? Yeah. Accepting your position, like basically fitting in, or yeah. Okay, yeah, accepting your position. Okay, so I guess I'll share a little anecdote, right? So I was thinking about this, I guess coming up to this day too, and so I was driving in the last couple of days, and so I called the wife, right? And I was driving, I called her, and then I said, "Hey, what is peace?" Right? And I hear a lot of commotion in the background. I hear a bunch of screaming. The kids are tearing the house apart. And she's like, peace means no more yelling, like no more screaming. It means like the books are where they're supposed to be. It means that the house is not being destroyed. It means that the kids are not attacking each other. It means that essentially peace is the order that she had created, coming back to that order that is peace, right? Might sound kind of funny, right? But let's just kind of take that into like the most basic way. Peace, sometimes we kind of think of it as, like everything's amazing, but that's not exactly what peace means. Peace is kind of, if you think about it, like in a state of stillness, right? Things are where you put them, right? They're exactly like as you came back in the room. They're still. They're what you put. Peace, in a way, is when things don't change, right? sometimes, Alhamdulillah, we've had the blessing of, being alive, of experiencing, summer, right? And as maybe you guys know, right? When the summer day is going, it feels great, right? But as the sun moves and you see that change, you know that day is coming to an end, and that creates a sense of uneasiness. There's no longer peace, right? There's change that's going on. The leaves start falling. Okay, back to school. There's stress. There's something that's not at peace. There's change, right? We see our parents getting old, and we see that death is coming, right? Once they were in a position of strength, and now the strength is becoming weak, right? It creates that uneasiness, right? And sometimes you know things by their opposite, right? So it's not in a state of peace. Peace, in a lot of ways, means order. That just like in that example, the house is where it's supposed to be. The dishes are done. The books are back in the bookshelf. The toys are in their toy chest. The kids are sleeping, let's say. It's peace. Things are the way they were supposed to be. I want us to kind of take this example, right? And let's come back all the way, right? So we are in the peace process. What is peace? I want you to particularly focus on the last defining thing that I mentioned, right? Peace is order. And accordingly, building on what we've discussed before, peace for the leading states, what does peace mean? That means maintaining their order, their influence, essentially maintaining the space and the framework they've created for the world. For the states that are kind of following them, for orbiting them, peace means fitting into that order. And for subjugated states, people that have almost no will, peace means quietly taking orders. So when we think of peace, sometimes we're thinking about something else as Muslims, but when we're thinking about it in the, you could call it the political arena, right? Peace means to maintain order. So for Pharaoh, maintaining power at any cost was peace for him. To maintain his order that was being threatened by the dream he was getting, that there will be someone from Bani Israel that will shake his throne, that will destroy what he has built, will destroy the order he has created. That for him is a huge threat to peace, to which he is willing to murder innocent baby boys, right? Every subsequent year in order to maintain that peace. A small contemporary example I want to share, right, about peace again, right, is that during the same time period we're talking about, right, around the 1970s, right, during the, well, I would say a little bit later, right, so during the Bill Clinton administration, right, they say that during his administration it was one of the most devastating regimes of economic sanctions in history, the most economic sanctions that the leading state of the world, being the US, right, and we discussed there's various ones, is employing the tactic of sanctions, right? And the UN estimated that, in particular, it took the lives of as many as 1 million Iraqis, a vast majority of them children. So in May 1996, a little bit past the area we're covering today, inshallah, Madeleine Albright, right, who was in the under the Clinton administration, was asked that we have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And is the price worth it? And she replies, I think this is a very hard choice, but the price we think is a price worth it. Why? Because just like in the time of Pharaoh and going back, it is a price for peace. It is a price that maintains the order of the world. Clear? Okay. And again, so a couple new faces. So I just want to kind of give a slight recap, and if not, we can kind of move forward. But one of the biggest lessons that we took from learning the history of Bani Israel, right? The history was that when you follow the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you obey His Prophet, Allah, the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala become true. Like the blessed land was originally a land promised to Bani Israel. But because of their disobedience, because of their corruption, because of their killing and slandering the prophets, many times they were completely either shunned or thrown away or destroyed from the land. And the point of studying the history of Bani Israel was not just to, for fun, or not just to make fun of them. It was because, unfortunately, today we find ourselves in a similar situation that we must come to terms with. Okay. So I don't want to get too much into there. We can kind of proceed a little bit into the history unless there are any questions. And how are we doing on time? I think we're a little bit behind, so I think inshallah we'll go ahead and get started. So 1973. There was a war between most of the Arab countries, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, as well as with Israel, right? And this was where, like we mentioned last time, the Muslims were in a position of strength. Like I said again, in 2 days of fighting, Israel had lost 49 aircrafts and 500 tanks. And in this position of power, instead of moving forward and liberating Muslims, they said, we want to participate and we want to achieve the achievement of peace in the Middle East, right? And again, peace in the Middle East, based on who's deciding. Okay, so let's move forward. 1974. So in an attempt to legitimize the PLO by the US culminated in the 1974 Arab Summit, where it was officially announced that the PLO was to be the sole legal representative of the Palestinians. Okay, let's just take a small snippet, right, based on what we talked about last time. So the PLO as an organization comes and says, hey, look, the Palestinians are in a horrible situation. Their land is being usurped, and we demand recognition for the state of Palestine. Sounds good on paper, right? But again, let's kind of apply that framework we've been talking about, right? So are they an independent entity trying to manifest their own destiny, trying to manifest their own future? No, right? They are working underneath a superpower, and they are looking for legitimacy. Okay. (1977). Egypt's president Anwar Sadat addresses Israel's parliament. During this event, basically he's opening up relations to ensue a peace treaty with Israel. September 1978. The first Camp David talks between Egypt, the Egyptian president Anwar Sadat, and the Israeli prime minister begin. March 1979. Formal Egypt-Israeli peace treaty has been signed, and Israel begins withdrawal from the Sinai Peninsula. And I want to kind of take that as a moment, right? So again, we see that things are kind of moving in a certain direction. They're moving toward peace, right? And what does peace mean again? It means that the order that has been established kind of remains, right? Egypt is wanting peace. It is wanting to recognize Israel as a state, and not necessarily rescue the blessed land as we talked about earlier. So October 1981. Egyptian President Mohammed Anwar Sadat is assassinated. Whilst reviewing a military parade, he is succeeded by his vice president, Hosni Mubarak, who commanded the Egyptian Air Force in the field 1973 war. So this is, again, another character, right, in this like play that we're kind of familiar with. Anyone that has been watching Hosni Mubarak, right? So from 1981 to very recently, right, during the Arab Spring, he kind of remained in power. August 1982, Israel invades Lebanon in an attempt to destroy the PLO's infrastructure. Israel bombs the PLO positions in Beirut and then takes West Beirut. The PLO leaves the city and sets up its headquarters in Tunis. Again, aggression, and again, there's no response. Why? Because this is something that falls into peace. It falls into the order that exists. So yeah, it's tragic for us as Muslims, but the story must continue, right? So September 1982. In coordination with the Israeli army enters the Palestinian refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila in Beirut. And they enact a massacre where more than 2,000 Palestinians are killed, massacred. An Israeli Judicial Commission finds that Israel has indirect responsibility for the massacre, and its defense minister, Ariel Sharon, the architect of Israel's invasion of Lebanon, is forced to resign. So Israel commits the Sabra and Shatila massacre, and at the same time, there is no responsibility, right? That's been taken for this. So things are boiling up. What happens, right? During the same time, the Palestinians start the first intifada, right? Which is the uprising, right? Violence in Israel, in the Israeli administrated areas. Israel responds with curfews, mass arrests, and during the intifada's first year, more than 300 Palestinians were killed in clashes with Israeli troops. And again, we see no response from the various actors, right? Because they have a position to maintain. But still, right? We still keep hearing about there is a peace process going on. Where exactly, if you guys are following, I know there's a lot of kind of events here, and we're not going to, for the purpose of this, kind of go into too deeply. But where is the peace? We see massacre. We see breaking of treaties. We see people curfewed. We see they have no freedom to move. But again, this is used as a pretext for peace. Hey, look, things are in a messed up state. Let's keep moving towards peace. A couple more points, and then we can kind of get into what is the main point of kind of getting into this. So July 1998, King Hussein of Jordan declares that the West Bank is no longer considered part of the Jordanian nation. Just think about it for a second. He gives away Muslim land for free. There was no war. There's no consequences. But by 1998, he just declares the West Bank is no longer considered part of Jordan, and it's I guess their problem. And Israel kind of jumps on that. So November 1998. Here we see that the U.S. plan for peace is finally starting to take shape. The Palestinian National Council meeting in Tunis issues a declaration of independence for a state of Palestine in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Yasser Arafat announces that the PNC recognizes Israel as a state in the region and accepts UN Resolution 242 and 338 concerning the end of the Middle East conflict. The US says it will open dialogue with the PLO. The US plan for peace, as we talk about, is finally taking shape. So I'm going to just kind of repeat that for a second. So Yasser Arafat announces that the PNC, the Palestinian National Council, recognizes Israel as a state in the region and accepts the decree of the UN. So he's accepted Israel as a state, okay, and at the same time working under the UN. Again, if you're looking for recognition for someone, you're not independent. You're not people that are looking for to become a leading nation. And we kind of went over this a lot more in the beginning, right? Is that a lot of people kind of say, hold up a second, we're not, what can we do? We're so small, and look at the might and power around us, right? And in this region, right, as we talked about kind of previously, that the context is that there is a big kind of war going on, right? There's not just one leading nation. There's actually two, right? We have the U.S. on one side and the Soviet Union on the other, and they're sort of competing on who can maintain their order. And although things don't break into a completely all-out war, this time frame is referred to as the Cold War. I'm sure, as you guys know, going through history, right? So again, the point is that there's a couple of big actors, and they are trying to make a framework for the world. And there are other people that are saying, okay, instead of what can we do to manifest our destiny, our own future, they're saying, how can we fit into this? And they're doing whatever they can to fit into what has been created. And as we kind of touched on last time, this is nothing new. There's a whole surah that Allah SWT revealed, right? Surah Rum, that commentates on the events of the world that's going on, and specifically the events of the superpowers. Because like this period we're talking about, in the time of Muhammad ﷺ, there were also empires and powers that were powerful beyond imagination, wealth beyond imagination, power beyond imagination, the technology beyond imagination, right? We had the Romans on one side and the Persians, and they were competing for, again, maintaining their order. Who has control, right? And so there would be constant clashes between the Persians and the Romans. And as the surah commentates, right, the Persians overtook the Romans. But as Allah SWT says, the Romans will come again, right? And we talked about why is that? Why is the thinking of the Muslims being directed that way? Because Muslims have come for something special, right? They have not come to be people that just kind of align and work within the framework. They're here for something bigger than themselves. They're here for something bigger than just feeding their bellies or just feeding their families or just even, getting a nice car or whatever. They're in it for something bigger. So like I said, right, we're talking about these historical events. And a lot of times the responses we hear is, but what can we do? We're so small, we're so divided, and things are huge. But again, what did Muhammad ﷺ do, right? The Arabs of the time were what you could call either orbiting states or really like subjugated states. Most of the Arabs that had some sort of land that was kind of special, like the Syrians, were kind of aligned with the Persians, right? And as we kind of discussed previously, when Muhammad ﷺ would approach certain tribes, they would say, yeah, okay, you know what, we can support you. We believe we'll do everything, but hey, we can't go against these guys. We have an alliance with them, right? Similarly to today, similarly to the events that we have discussed. And I may not go into too much detail unless we open in the question and answer. But again, what did Muhammad ﷺ do right as he has attained authority in the land? As the state of Medina has been established, the first Islamic state, what does he do? Does he say, hey, Romans, ally with us, we want to be in your orbit, or hey, the Persians, we want to be in your orbit, or etc. Astaghfirullah, he doesn't do that, right? So the Muslims of Medina, right, they are still fighting for their survival. They're still fighting for the Arabian Peninsula. They're still fighting the Quraysh. They're still fighting the tribes that do not believe in Allah subhanahu and want to extinguish the light of Islam. But despite this, that we kind of mentioned last time, is what does Muhammad ﷺ do? In this state of apparent weakness, he sends messengers to these various superpowers, and it's not there to, hey, please recognize us, please support us. Hey, these Qurayshi people are attacking us. That's not what he says. What he says is, paraphrasing it, is that this is a message from Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, and it is an invitation for you to believe. And if you do not believe, get ready for war, right? And when we kind of went over the history of the Muslims a little bit briefly, right? That's exactly what they did. Because why? They were a leading nation. They were a people that had a vision. They were sacrificing and living for something greater than themselves, and which is to make the words of Allah subhanahu the highest. And they were willing to sacrifice their lives, their livelihoods, their money, their wealth for it, because they wanted something bigger. It wasn't just to fit into the framework of the world. It was to create an order for the world. Okay, so again, right? Becoming a leading people, right? Becoming a people who shape your own destiny has almost nothing to do with how big you are or how strong you are. It has a little bit to do with it, but not significantly. What is much heavier is to be a people that have vision, right? That want to take the world to a certain place and are willing to sacrifice for that. Okay. So a couple more events, and then we'll kind of get into what this all sort of means, right? A little bit. And I think we'll kind of stop on this. So September 1993. We skipped a little bit. So, but in the interest of time, we'll kind of skip some of this. But again, 1991, there's more treaties going on. Some of the players that are on the table are Israel, Jordan, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon. And again, they want peace, right? They want to work in the framework, the order that has been created. They do not want to rock the boat. They want to maintain peace. And so they are walking down this path. September 13, 1993, the Oslo Accords. The Declaration of Principles signed by Israeli and PLO leaders include the following main provisions. So, okay, they're getting some sort of recognition now. Let's see what they've got on the table. Number one, a 5-year period of Israeli troop withdrawal, initially from Gaza, from the Gaza Strip and Jericho, culminating in the transfer of authority in most of the rest of the West Bank in all matters except for foreign relations, defense, and other mutually agreed matters. So the first point that the Palestinian, so-called Palestinians are getting is, okay, you can get some sort of authority, but you have no control over foreign relations. You have no control over defense. You have no army. You have no real power on the ground. And in all other matters, authority is still deferred to Israel. Okay, let's see what else. Number two, the creation of the Palestinian police force. Okay. Number three, the organization of elections to be held for the Palestinian Authority, the continued Israeli withdrawal from villages. Okay. Number four, from the West Bank. Okay. And then, so this would be in a sort of like in a process of peace, land for peace deal, right? So basically, Israel controls everything, and you get to have authority, right? You get to have your own internal police force. You get to police your own people, but you cannot have an army. You cannot control your foreign affairs. You essentially cannot control your destiny in anything. Does this sound like independence to you? Does it? It doesn't, right? And does it sound like peace to you? No, it doesn't. And as we've seen, has this created peace for the Palestinians or no? No, right? This is what the peace process is about. The peace process is for maintaining order. So what happens? Before the Muslims were one, right? In 1924, the Muslim Ummah is on the losing side of World War I. Traitors amongst the Ummah disband the Khilafah as a state for the Muslims. The victors of the time, the superpowers, the British and the French, divide the Muslim world into the states that we know today. Okay, but the peace continues more than that. The order that has been created, the peace continues even further. Now Palestine is divided into the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Okay, we'll go even further and divide it even more. So this is the end result of peace, is that the Muslim Ummah keeps being divided, the aggression of the Israelis doesn't stop, but still there's a process of peace kind of going. Lots of details to kind of continue, but the point is that there is no real conclusion that is happened. This whole process keeps being suspended further and further. Okay, we didn't get peace yet, but we'll get peace in 10 years. Okay, we'll get peace in another 5 years. Okay, we'll get peace in 20 years. We kind of discussed this last time, but do you guys know how long the land of Palestine has been occupied so far? 72 years, exactly. This is the second occupation of the Holy Land of Al-Quds in the Muslim history. Do you guys know when the first one was? We went over it briefly, but any ideas? It was during the time when the Crusaders occupied the land of Al-Quds, right, the Holy Land. And do you know how long they had it? Again, kind of a quiz for some of the guys that were here before. 86 years. 86 years, right? So we still have we still have a good 14 years, but point is, this is not the first time this happened, but the unique situation is that during the time of when the Crusaders invaded the Muslim lands, yes, the Muslims were divided, yes, they were weak, but they had a order. They had the Muslim order happening, which was the state of the Muslims, right? They had the Khilafah, they had the Khalifa amongst the Muslims, they had the Amir al-Mu'mineen, right? Yes, in a state of weakness, but that allows for you to make moves. It allows for you to manifest your destiny, and it allows for Muslims to attain power. Anyways, so we went through a lot of the peace process today, right? And we talked about in the beginning, what exactly does peace mean? And in the political arena, what peace essentially means is maintaining the order that has stayed. If you're anybody rocking the boat, guess what? You're labeled as someone that does not want peace. You're labeled as, so many names we've heard growing up. So many names, we've heard like in junior high and high school and stuff like that they call the Muslims, right? But the point is, peace is to maintain order, right? So what are the main points for today, right? If you got nothing out today, inshallah, I know I was personally in a rush. Maybe you guys were as well, but at least we'll take a couple points for today, right? The first is that there is an order to the world that we currently live in, and the Muslims are not leading it. The Muslims are on the bottom of the barrel. They're not even the guys orbiting, like trying to fit in the order. They are the guys taking orders. And honestly, the Muslims are in a state of disorder where we are out of order, because the order that we had in Islam, that there is a shepherd upon every person, and the shepherd, amongst the Muslims, the Khalifa has been gone. So the order, the house that was sort of established, has not existed, right? So we are in a state of disorder, and in that absence, people have created an alternate order where we are on the bottom, right? Okay. Point number 2, right? That the blessed land of Al-Quds has been stuck in a peace process for decades, for 72 years, actually, we're talking about, for more than 50 years with no real peace and constant destruction and instability, except for the leading nations who are maintaining their idea of peace, their world order. Okay, number 3, that the Muslims are meant to always be a leading nation, as the example of Muhammad was given, right? And this is not dependent, and not in a state of where they're dependent and a self-subjugated nation, like the cursed nation of Bani Israel, right? So what we talked about previously, when Bani Israel killed their prophets, when they refused to obey their prophets, when they refused to believe in Isa alayhi salam as a prophet, when they refused to believe in Muhammad as a prophet, they had no more real leadership internally. So what happened in that vacuum? They became dependent on the Persians, on the Romans, kicked out by the Babylonians, etc., by the British, by the Americans. That is their fate, because they are a cursed nation that disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that is not our destiny. Our destiny is to be a leading nation, no matter how powerful we are, no matter how small we are. Okay, number 4, we as the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam need to have a vision and lead. And that means refusing to be in orbit or subjugation to any other nation. We're not here to, just make money, just get the biggest cars, get the biggest houses. We are here, as a nation, as an ummah, to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the highest, and to create real peace in the world. And the real peace means order according to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it. Okay. And the last thing I kind of wanted to discuss, but maybe we'll get in the Q&A, is that we're in the month of Muharram, right? And this is the time when a new order was created in the world, right? The world was in a state of disorder. It was when the world was in a state of lack of peace. It was when the world was essentially in a state of Jahiliyyah, right? This was before Islam had authority. And after the establishment of the state of Medina, right? This first Islamic state, the world was finally in a state of peace, in a state of order, where the law and the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were supreme, and it was being spread, right? Dawah to the world was taking place. So we are in a state of disorder. We are in a state where the Muslims have lost this order, and unfortunately, because of that, we have no peace. Even though the world is marching towards a peace process, it is not in our interest. It is not in our image. It is not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. It is peace according to their order. And inshallah, I think we'll kind of stop there for today and kind of open the floor for questions and answers, and we can kind of jump to a discussion then. So when we get the queue, we can kind of switch over.